Hi guys. So the other day on the Wavy Hair subreddit, there was this thread that got really highly upvoted. It was talking about how so many threads in the Wavy Hair subreddit are about, is my hair even wavy? That's a really common question for people who their hair is kind of straight, but they, for some reason or another, think that maybe it's wavy and they just never knew. And that's really confusing for some people, but it's definitely a thing that happens. I didn't know that my hair was wavy until I was like 24 or 25. Like in hindsight, it seems weird that I didn't know, but I didn't know. So kind of to try to answer some of those questions of how can you tell if your hair is wavy, I thought I would go over some of the signs that your straight hair might like secretly be wavy. The biggest one that I notice is when your hair is poofy. Looking back at my pictures before I started styling my hair wavy, it was always poofy. And I thought it was straight and poofy because it didn't have like obvious definition to it. It didn't have clear spirals or clear like S waves or anything like that. It was just poofy. I realize now that that was because I was brushing out what would have been waves. I was just always taught that how you take care of your hair is you brush it or comb it at least, and you get out of the shower again each morning, sometimes like throughout the day if it gets like messy or frizzy. That's just what I thought everybody did. I didn't even really think about like what people with tightly curly hair do, or that, you know, most of them don't brush their hair. I didn't know that. So I didn't realize that I was brushing out my waves, but that's what was making it poofy and kind of like lumpy and bumpy, but not like obviously wavy. So at the end of this video, I'm gonna brush out my hair and you can see how poofy it will get. And that might kind of clue you into like, if your hair looks like this and you've been brushing it, maybe if you don't brush it, add in like a gel or a mousse, it might be wavy. The second big sign that your hair might actually be wavy is if it's frizzy. When I was younger, my hair was poofy and not frizzy, but how I actually came across like the curly girl method and how I came to discover that my hair was wavy is my hair got super frizzy, like where I would have like an inch of just frizz like up on top of my head and around the sides of my hair. I remember a couple of instances where I had left my hair down and I was like talking to somebody in public and I became aware that they were watching my frizz as they were talking to me because it was very obvious and very visible. It had just gotten crazy, the amount of frizz. And so I was wearing my hair up all the time just to try to hide the frizz. And so I was looking for frizz solutions. And whenever I was like Googling for things related to frizz, I kept coming across all these articles about how to deal with frizz if you have wavy hair or curly hair. And I couldn't find anything about frizzy straight hair. And eventually, I think it was actually on Reddit, somebody was like, if your hair is really frizzy and straight, it's probably wavy and you should like try to take care of it like it's wavy and see what it does. And so that's how I found the curly girl method and discovered that my hair is wavy. But so if you battle with frizz, especially if it's pretty severe, that's very likely to be your hair attempting to like wave or curl. The third one is if you've always thought of your hair as straight, but it's not straight in the sense of like what you would think of if you think of somebody who's like used to straightening iron. So my hair didn't have obvious waves, but it wasn't straight. It had like random lumps and bumps in it, the way that like, you know, sometimes people who have straight hair will put their hair in a ponytail and then they take it out and it has this like bump from where the ponytail was. My hair would have like kind of lumps or bumps like that in it, even if I didn't use a hair tie. It just wasn't straight. It just had a couple of like curves in it. Another one that this one kind of blew my mind when I realized what caused it. So if you feel like every time you get your hair cut, your hairstylist always cuts your hair more than you asked her to or him to. I really just thought this was like a universal experience, that people who cut hair are naturally inclined to like err on the side of cutting a little more, maybe to get rid of dead ends or damage or whatever it may be. But I always felt like if I asked to have 2 inches cut off, I would have 3 inches cut off or whatever. I never felt like they left my hair as long as I asked them to. after realizing that my hair was wavy, I came to realize that that's because if you have textured hair, it shrinks when it dries. So, because it's straighter when it's wet. So, you know, typical haircuts are cut wet. So they might have really only cut off an inch when it was wet, but it might be an inch and a half or 2 inches when it's dry if your hair is wavy, or even more so if it's like curlier, tighter curls. And it's not that they just cut more than you ask them to. It's just because your hair shrinks if it's textured. And that's true even if it's not like defined waves. Like I said, mine was like lumpy and bumpy, but it still like sprung up a little bit more than truly straight hair would. One of the other signs that I missed in my own hair looking back was if you think you have straight hair, but you have to straighten it for it to look good straight. I straightened my hair basically every day from the time I was probably 13 to, I don't know, in my early 20s somewhere. And I remember in high school, a friend saying to me, "Why do you straighten your hair if it's already straight?" And I didn't think twice about the answer. The answer was to make it less poofy. I wasn't straightening it to make it straight in my mind, but it made it more sleek. It went from being lumpy, bumpy, and just big and poofy to looking, well, actually straight, I guess. And it never occurred to me that that poofiness was that brushed out curl in my hair that I was then straightening with the straightening iron. A sign that I've learned from just hanging out in like wavy and curly groups, I didn't personally experience this, but some people who have wavy hair will find that when they wash their hair, maybe brush it, whatever, it looks pretty straight. But if they exercise or otherwise get sweaty, or if they get caught in the rain, then they'll end up with wavy or curly hair that day. It seems especially common for people to talk about this like right here, like kind of your little baby hairs at the edges of your temples, or like the little baby hairs at the nape of your neck. My theory on this, and this is just my guess, is that there's two causes for that. One is usually the hair like in those two areas is particularly fine, or at least more fine than the rest of your hair, and so it's just easier for it to curl up because it's smaller. And then the second one is, I think, kind of yucky, but sweat tends to pool in those areas. So like it's common for like right above your neck to be particularly hot if you're working out or something. And so sweat is water, it is moisture. And so if you have that kind of hair that the more moisture it gets, the better it's going to curl, then you might find that when you get sweaty or when your hair gets wet in the rain and then you don't brush it afterwards the way that you would after a shower, your hair is going to revert to being wavy or curly that day. The next point goes along with the poofy point a little bit, but if you've ever noticed that your hair gets poofier when it gets shorter or when it gets to a certain length. I think in my late teens or early 20s, I finally had the realization that to get rid of the poof, I could get my hair really long. For much of my like younger years, I kind of went back and forth between having like shoulder length hair and having longer hair. And it was almost like there's this like magical point where if it's like below my collarbone, my hair isn't as poofy. If it gets like shoulder length or shorter, it gets extra poofy. And so I realized if I grew my hair long enough, it wouldn't naturally be as poofy. So then I wouldn't have to straighten it to get rid of the poof. And so in my early 20s, I quit straightening my hair and it was just super long. And it wasn't poofy anymore, but then it slowly started getting really frizzy. And so for me, kind of that sweet spot was if it was like kind of at or above my shoulders or below my shoulders, but the longer it was, the less poofy it was. And after it occurred to me that my hair was wavy and I started to understand that poofy hair was brushed out waves, I realized that my hair, at least to a certain length, if it gets shorter, it gets curlier because it's just less heavy, it can spring up better. So I think what was happening with why my hair got poofier when it was shorter is because it was able to attempt to curl up shorter, but because I was brushing it, it just looked like more poof instead of more waves or curls. Another sign that your hair might actually be wavy is if it kind of got unruly or frizzy or poofy or otherwise just changed, especially if that change was around puberty or around a pregnancy, having a baby, or like the postpartum period, or maybe even starting birth control. A lot of times changes in hair texture seem to happen side by side with hormone changes. And so my hair was a little bit poofy when I was a little kid, but I definitely became the most conscious of it. And like even looking back in pictures, I can see it got more poofy when I was like 11 or 12. And so I think that probably lined up with puberty for me. And I've definitely like heard similar experiences from other people as well. And for some people, it happens the opposite way too. Some people, they have curly hair as a little kid, then they go through puberty and it gets straighter, or they get pregnant or go on birth control, have a baby, and it gets straighter. So it can go either way. But if your hair had any of those changes around puberty, then it's likely that it was changing texture in one direction or the other. Another giveaway that your hair is lying to you and it's secretly wavy is if you really battle humidity. If you always feel like you're having a terrible hair day when it's humid, that's likely related to your hair texture. For a lot of people, their hair curls up better when it's humid because it gets more moisturized. Our hair naturally will try to balance out how moisturized it is inside of our hair with the air around us. So our hair literally maintains less moisture in like the dry winter time than it would in like the humid summertime. So for some people, the more moisturized their hair is, the better it curls. If you notice that your hair is more unruly, is more frizzy, more poofy, is just different on days where it's humid, that likely is related to your hair having some hidden waves or curls in there. A huge one, if I were doing this in like importance order, this would have been higher on the list, but this is just a random list. So if your hair isn't straight when it's wet, and this is a weird one because I've seen pictures of myself when I had wet hair as a kid, or at least as like a preteen or a young teen, where my hair was really clearly wavy when it was wet. Definitely not straight. And somehow I just never thought about it. I never thought about the fact that my hair is wavy when it's wet, but then when it's straight, it's dry. And I think probably the reason I didn't think about that is because that's true for most other people in my family too. And they also have naturally wavy hair that they brush out into straight hair. So in my world, it was normal, even though to other people that would probably seem strange. If your hair is wavy when it's wet, then it at least has the potential to be styled wavy if you choose to. Because basically what we do is use gel or mousse to lock in the texture that it has when it's wet, let it dry that way, and that preserves the texture. So this is point number 10, and I kind of felt like I should do 10 points. But this is definitely the least sure sign. But if your hair was curly when you were a baby or a little kid, there's at least some chance that it's wavy now. What happens to a lot of people is their hair is curly as a baby, toddler, preschooler, and then it goes straight as they get older. A lot of people just don't know how to care for curly hair. And with little kids, how you care for it is different. Like you kind of have to brush little kids' hair. So a lot of times what happens is little kids have hair that's curly even when it's brushed because it's really curly. It's really able to support itself. Even if it's brushed, it'll spring back up. So then as they get a little bit older, their parents or they keep brushing their hair, but it no longer springs back up. And so then they assume it's gone straight. But sometimes it still has wavy potential. It just isn't as like durable of a curl texture, so that when you're brushing it, it's now getting straightened out. The reason I say that this is less of a sure thing is because your hair texture absolutely can and often does change throughout your lifetime. A lot of times I see people in wavy or curly hair groups that will post a picture of themselves as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and they know that their hair is wavy now, but it was really curly when they were little. And they're like, how can I get this hair texture back? Or how did I ruin my curl texture? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you've ruined your hair or that your hair is damaged or anything like that. Like sometimes your hair just gets looser textured as you age. And it's also very true that some people have really straight hair as babies or little kids, but then it gets wavy or curly as they get older. So it definitely can go either way. Well, those are my 10 signs. If you want to know for sure if your hair is wavy, I'll link a post to my blog where I have an article about how you can test if your hair is wavy, because that's really like the ultimate way to find out, is to treat your hair like it's wavy and see what it does. You don't have to like run out and buy Curly Girl approved products. I mean, you can, but I'm cheap. So personally, I would just recommend using whatever you have already. And if your hair is wavy, it will be wavy if you use non-Curly Girl approved products. It's not the silicones and sulfates, all those rules aren't what makes a difference in if hair is wavy or curly. It's more about like technique and using a product with hold. I'm gonna commit a Curly Girl sin and brush my hair dry. I'm actually gonna use a wide tooth comb first, just because if I try to go through it with this, it'll probably be all tangly. To start with, this is what it looks like. And that's kind of a bad hair day for me, by the way, but it is what it is. So I guess that makes it easier to ruin it if it's not. This side like needs a protein treatment, I think, but here we go. Oh gosh, even this is hard to get through my hair. Oh, I kind of forget. You're supposed to start from the bottom and then work, and it will get less tangly that way. See, it's getting so booby down here. Okay. This is always my straighter side, but it's extra straight at the moment. But it still gets a lot poopier when I comb it. Okay, so this is how big my hair gets when I brush it. I feel like you can still tell that there's some wave in here, especially in the front. But this part right here is always my most like well-defined wave. So that doesn't really surprise me. But yeah, like I could almost like hide my shoulders behind it. So if your hair looks anything like this when you brush it out, it's probably wavy. Here's the back. If you guys are like me and you discovered that your hair was wavy later in life, or if this video helps you to go on and test if your hair is wavy and discover it's wavy, leave me a comment and let me know. I love finding out that I've like helped people discover that their hair is wavy. But I'd also be really curious like what other like secret signs that you guys can look back and see that your hair was always wavy and you just didn't realize it for a long time, especially if they're ones that I didn't consider. Let me know what they are, and they might help other people too. See you guys next time.